right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever it is that you're joining us today. My name is Ali Hirji. I am the lead of the Center for Cybersecurity Innovation at Durham College. You know, they say that creativity is when you think about new things. Innovation is actually when you do new things. In new environments, situations that require creativity, innovation is the key. And the people that I have here today are great people to talk to about how, in this uncertain climate, we're able to secure funding, but more importantly, we're able to secure that we need in order to manage ourselves in this new moment. We have folks who come with a very strong cybersecurity background. We have folks who understand that data is the new oil. If AI is the rocket, data is the fuel. We have folks who are working on smart cities. We have folks who are working on financial technologies. And then we have panelists who come from a global perspective, not just from Canada. It's my pleasure today to welcome our panelists. I'm not going to introduce them myself. I'll let them introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Michael Castro. Michael?
Hey, hello everybody. So Michael Castro, I am a cybersecurity expert, 21 years in the business, now founder and president of RiskAware, a cybersecurity boutique.
Thank you, Michael. John, over to you.
Hi, I'm John Pinard. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Resource Productivity and Recovery Authority. We're a government regulator for the Ministry of the Environment.
Thank you. Neil?
Neil Appalsamy, I'm the CEO at Forpay Incorporated. We're a fintech technology provider. We operate internationally. My background, I have about 25 years in fintech / telecom experience.
Fantastic. Eric, over to you, sir.
Hi, it's Eric Pulnicki. I work for City of Brampton in information technology and digital innovation team, and I'm a senior manager, and under my portfolio there are solutions and smart city workloads.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Malik, the last introduction is over to you, sir.
My name is Tariq Malik. I'm former Chief Technology Officer of Pakistan Army. I did my first hack in 1988 on the Australian Academic Research Network. Since then, I'm within the security business. And just to add that I also looked after the security of Dubai Smart City initiative as well.
Thank you very much. I was born and brought up in Dubai, what we like to call the land of have yachts and have nots. So we have lots to talk about. Let's jump right into the conversation today. I see approximately 33 people in here. I also see Devin from the City of Brampton and Invest Brampton. So I do want to thank both Invest Brampton and Forpay for sponsoring this session and supporting the cyber exchanges this week. Let's jump into the fundamental question that we're in right now. Yesterday, I was doing a session with Minister Rod Phillips, along with Mayor Sean Collier and MPP Khalid Rashid. And we talked about this aspect of the framework of reopening Ontario. Slow and steady, as Marge Simpson says, wins the race. But when it comes to all of us moving our businesses online, we moved in extremely fast, where typically we had a 1-year period for digital transformation. We completed that in 1 week. What security measures have we kept in place, and are we truly secure? Michael, I want to give you a minute to talk to us about the pace at which we have moved into this new this new digital world and our cybersecurity posture. Michael, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ali. No, there's no doubt that, this scenario that we've been put in has really accelerated and amplified the need to use technology to get everything up and running. And for sure, out the gate, productivity, connectivity have been the #1 priorities for everybody. And we have succeeded as a society. Unfortunately, though, security has, taken a bit of a backseat on all that, has opened the door for a lot of opportunities for threats and hackers to take advantage of those gaps, whether it be through remote workers, through those that are connecting on their personal Wi-Fi's, or any of those aspects. And whether it be e-commerce, whether it be access to the offices, cybersecurity has, been that small sister to the productivity piece. The good news is that's changing, and that's where I think everyone now is starting to say security has to be part of this as well.
I want to take that thing about security not as an afterthought, but security by design. And Neil, when we were talking, you were mentioning quite a lot about the various aspects of how different businesses now have reached out to you about, hey, we want to take our transactions online. We need to transform. We need to execute on our deliverables online. And from a financial perspective, you've had to walk them through some pretty serious cybersecurity scenarios very quickly. What's that been like for you, and how has Forpay been managing that?
Well, because this is a new normal, and Michael's quite right that security has taken a back seat to a lot of the projects that took priority prior to COVID. Now that things are online, effectively the design that is being brought forward has to protect the users, has to ensure that the product and the brand that's being brought to market at such breakneck speeds is being accounted for. There's no time for afterthought right now. It has to be baked in at the inception of the project. So we've seen the security conversations with our customers. Our clients we've woven that into almost every meeting. How is a functionality going to benefit, but how do you protect a functionality? And so it's a part of every meeting. Makes the days longer, but it ensures that at the outset, you're not putting security in the back seat.
And I like that analogy of not putting security at the back seat. And you need the leadership and guidance in order to ensure that you're able to do that. The cost of accessing cybersecurity talent just like that is quite expensive. And this is where I want to sort of open the door to our municipal partners here, and with Eric. Eric, from the City of Brampton's perspective, I'm sure a lot of small to medium businesses have been coming to you about what resources are available to you, are available to them when it comes to moving their operations online, especially from a financial standpoint and executing on transactions, e-commerce being one example of that. What is the City of Brampton doing to ensure that these companies moving online, in this hyper online world, are staying safe and secure and not using cybersecurity as an afterthought? Eric?
Yeah, so from that perspective, we have a built-in mechanism to make sure that whatever solution we put in place is secure. So that's in terms of how you build and how to implement the solution. The challenge always is that speed of implementation or requirement for the fast implementation is now being bigger and bigger, and we need to deliver faster and faster and new elements. And then this is where the biggest challenge is, how to make sure that we do not cut the corners. Because if we do everything according to the plan, according to the framework, according to our design and implementation principles, then there is not a big problem. The problem starts when we have to cut the corners because the timelines are being too aggressive to go with standard process and standard way of doing things. And the other elements is also, I don't know how many of you are experiencing that, but we as a municipal environment and government, we need to be compliant to many regulations. And this is not easy, especially when those regulations are maybe outdated. And I'm talking about the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, which is very strict, but at the same time, it is not as easy to comply with because it doesn't really match the current state of technology and the way we're doing the business. So that's one element. And another element is compliance to accessibility of Ontario for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. That is also bring those challenges when you need to put the solution quickly in place, and it needs to be secure, it needs to be compatible with other rules and regulations.
Thank you for that, Eric. And I do want to bring in Mr. Tariq Malik to sort of comment on a smart cities perspective, especially the Dubai perspective, which is go big and big and big and never go home. So we'll talk to Mr. Malik about how, you know, in other global contexts they've sort of accommodated for fintech and securing that. John, from a privacy, from a compliance and the security perspective, you know, moving more operations online, financial transactions online, you know, what are some of the challenges that you see from a security perspective that need to be addressed?
Well, from our standpoint, we built from the ground up. And so we had the pleasure of making sure that cybersecurity and privacy was built in and threaded into the core of what we implemented. You know, we are, as I said, we're a regulator of Ontario businesses. And, you know, there's a lot of commercially sensitive data that was critical, that we not only ensured that that data was secure, but we actually had to prove to the stakeholders that their data was secure. And so, you know, it was a really tough balancing act between accessibility and security. And even more so now, you know, I mean, all of our registrants were all already online, but one of the issues that we ran into on March 16th, actually, was how do you take all of the individuals that were working in the office and, you know, locked down that data so it was only accessible from our office. And now all of a sudden, come March 16th, on March 13th, it was only available from within the office. On March 16th, we had to make sure that all of our staff had access to the same data and only the same data that they had when they were in the office, but working remote. And so it has meant ensuring that we maintained a lockdown state, but opened a couple of doors just to be able to allow people to, or the people that needed to access that data to get in from their homes. So it's been quite a challenge, but it has proven to be successful. I think everybody in the organization was impressed at how quickly we were able to flip the switch without risking any data.
No, absolutely. I mean, one of the things in Henry Ford, right, a statement where he said, if I asked the public what they wanted, they'd all tell me faster horses. But you folks are in that situation where you need to not only know the technology, you need to know how to apply it, you need to know how to scale it, especially sitting in a leadership position. Now, I want to turn the conversation to Tariq Malik and give him a couple of minutes to talk to us about how have cities been prepared, or have they been prepared for a moment like this where you have no choice, but you have to take everything online, you have to move all of your transactions online, and you have to secure it. Were we ready for this? And I know it's a broad question, but I'd like you to speak to it perhaps from the perspective in Dubai, but from a general global perspective. Malik, a couple of minutes to you.
The quantum of that exercise is so big that very few people can actually really understand it. And the reasons, I'll give it to you. When a city decides that they want to automate everything, and they also decide that by 2021, they will be paper-free, paperless. The whole idea started that the Sheikh of Dubai decided that he wants to make his people happy. For them to be happy, he wanted to provide services which make their life easy. Once they decided to make services which makes life easy for the people, they looked at all the aspects and all the services which were offered by Dubai e-government, which happened to be designed by me, Dubai municipality, and the linkages of all the services with all the other departments, including Ministry of Commerce, Law and Order, Immigration, Police, whatever you take it, they all had to be connected. Then you start looking at it, all the sensors. If a sensor is coming from a taxi, the sensors from the trains are moving, the sensors which are sending the data from airports. And as you move forward, you look at the amount of data coming towards you. So you have to first look at the data, you have to sign the agreements. What sort of data is visible at the central side by whom? Then which protocols and how the data will come back? Which technologies will be used? Each and every technology had its own problems. What standards one will have to use when the data comes back from different sensors as a smart city? So you very rightly asked the question that were we ready? I have to say that even though I worked in the military environment and where, again, we use the word elements. For the elements, we get the data coming from hundreds and millions of environments. But in this case, when in the army, the data has to be secure, but it's within our own domain. Over here, each and every department doesn't want to share their data with the other department, except for certain pieces of information. But when the data is coming to us, we have to take it to the big data, we have to do analysis, we have to look at from the criminal perspective, incidents, efficiency, its security. Yes, it's a mind-boggling exercise. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. And your comments have spurred a question which I want to take to Neil and Eric and then Michael and John. Neil, let's start off with you. And the question that's come in is that, look, we've all sort of bought into this dichotomy, this conversation or this narrative of smart cities. I like to, refer to it as smart communities because that brings in our rural communities as well. It doesn't just focus on the metropolis. But the question that's coming here is, okay, we all want to move more into digital environments and be more smarter of how we collect data, so on and so forth. But how are we supposed to now, in this economy right now, use fintech-like tools securely to get transactions going? Are these tools that we have for financial innovation and to spur the economy online, are these tools capable of getting people to say, hey, we can engage differently with each other, we can pay differently with each other? Are we pushing towards a new type of economy? Neil, starting off with you.
So it's an interesting question, right? It's a bit of a conundrum. You're building tech for inclusiveness, but we as a society, we're finding that our data is quite precious to us. And so giving that permission to be able to share, to be able to be included in this larger network that is more about sharing where we're at, what we like to buy, where we like to go, where we like to who we want to talk to, right? We effectively have to give that up in order for these tools to work. And so we're in this constant fight about bettering the technology, but at the same time, our societies, regardless of country, our societies need to effectively be able to be in a position where they're willing to do that. You've seen in China, for example, with tracing, right? Look at COVID-19 specifically. That came top down. Now we're trying to bring that sort of methodology here to North America, and it's head meet wall, right? And in that fight, we know what we want to accomplish, but we need to make sure that we have the individuals alongside with that. And so it's a bit of a tug of war, but at some point, there's going to be enough of a personal interest in everyone's commitment to, for example, contact tracing, to say, yeah, I'm willing to give up this piece of information for the betterment of my community, right? And therefore it makes sense. Technology needs to effectively help us understand or help to communicate to the individuals how they are going to protect that data once they have that permission. So it's a little bit of both, right? Tech needs to get there, but the environment, the communities need to get there as well.
Great segue into I'll weave in the other question here for Eric. And sort of building off where Neil says is that you're kind of right now, you have no choice. If you were doing person-to-person interactions and taking payments that way or whatever have you, or engaging in transactions that way. Now you have no choice, but it is going to move digital. Folks are familiar with Stripe and PayPal and all of these other things that are out there. But what is, from the City of Brampton perspective, how are you addressing some of the training needs that people have on how to scale and how to safely adopt some of these technologies and move into more e-commerce environments? These movements into e-commerce worlds come at a cost, come at a substantial resource strain as well. Is there anything that the City of Brampton is doing to support such businesses? Eric?
So from that perspective, yes, the biggest challenge is to not to put the technology in front. And this is why many people and many organizations make the biggest mistake is, oh, we have that shiny technology, let's use it, right? And this is where we seeing the adoption level problems, training problems, and at the end, even value realization problem. So as far as that maybe sounds very strange, but I would say put the technology in the very last element of the chain of whatever you're using. Focus on a business need, not on a technology. Validate business need, value realization often as soon as you start, every week, okay, before you go too far, validate, is this really achieving and realizing the business value, okay? Then, and one of the elements also when people are very hesitant is whatever you do with the collecting the information and dealing with the information and everything, they personalize the information at the source, at the collection point. And so to gain the trust, because that's where the biggest challenge and resistance is from the user perspective, is the trust. Okay, do I trust that information, or do I trust the system that whatever I'm doing with the system will not harm me in one way or another later on? So one more time, it's like validate the business need. Very often focus on a business, don't focus on a technology. And as far as much as possible, pay attention to depersonalize the information at the collection point, at the source.
Thank you for that. And that element of, validate the data, look through the data, brings me to want to sort of get the conversation now towards Michael and John, and then we'll go back to Tariq, Malik. Michael, they say carefulness costs you nothing. But in this environment right now, being careful, ultimately you end up going a little slow, and it can cost you quite a lot. We're getting questions about what are some of the security blind spots that we may be missing as we move our communities and our economies into the digital stratosphere. Michael, I'll give you a couple of minutes to comment on those blind spots.
Yeah, so first off, I want to say I love technology, and I think for us to move forward with e-commerce, for us to move forward in the smart city world, we're going to have to rely on technology. It is the key to move us forward in those directions. I think, Ali, you touched on it at the beginning when we started talking about security by design, and I think a lot of it where we look at, and trust being that key thing, is we really have to be looking at the design concept of where security fits in as we're building out and we're strategizing and we're mapping out and architecting these financial solutions, these smart cities, and the way that citizens and users are expecting things to go going forward. There'll always be those that are very paranoid or worried and lack the trust. There are those that are too free-willing in their trust beliefs and will try anything and not really care about it. From a security perspective, though, we really need to ensure that we are, where we can, crossing the T's and dotting the I's. And as much as we move into an agile environment and where we look to speed to getting things out, whether as a business impact or a business advantage, or whether it just be because of the demands and the needs, we have to ensure that security is staying in view and, not necessarily being the first thing and the most important thing in what is being done, but definitely continue to be in, because there will be those gaps, there will be those areas that if they're not easily identified or even seen at the beginning, they're going to pop up. And, we have to remember that there's some very smart people on the against side of security, you know, as well as on the pro side, right? And so when we look at the white and black side of cyber, a lot of smart people on the hacking and the threat actor side that are keen to look, to find, to probe, and to take advantage of any gaps that they find. And we have to be able to be prepared to either find them first or be able to deal with them very quickly once they're discovered.
And I guess this points, and it's a great moment to let the door open for John, because now, you know, the CISOs and the CIOs suddenly take on a little bit of a different reporting structure, because they're the ones who know, you know, what you could be facing. And John, I want to sort of hear from your perspective, is that how has this, you know, the situation that we're in, how has this impacted how you're being heard in terms of the enterprise at large? Are suddenly people taking a little bit more note that, you know, our IT security folks and our IT leads are not just working in silos, and they're part of each and every step of what we do? John, some thoughts on that communication process?
Yeah, I think you know. So one of the comments I would make is that when you're building systems or implementing systems and you're looking at security and privacy, it's always, you know, you always go into it hoping for the best, but you have to prepare for the worst, because it only takes one to knock you down. I can give you an example where an organization that I used to work at, there was an accounts payable clerk that received an email that said, "Please pay this invoice immediately." They double clicked on it, and lo and behold, it was ransomware, and it started to encrypt not only all of the files on her system, but all of the files on the network that it was attached to. And it took literally 2 seconds. And so if you aren't prepared for it, I mean, we were prepared for those types of things, but it still took 3 days to recover from it. You get organizations that if they're not prepared for it, it can actually shut their doors. And I mean, that's a big stretch for something that, you know, if you need to prepare for up front. I have for years been told that I'm too paranoid, but from a CIO, CISO standpoint, you have to be paranoid these days, because I think it was Michael said, these guys are smart. In a lot of cases, they're smarter than the guys on our side of the fence, and they know what to do. They know how to get through things. And it's really unfortunate that in light of COVID-19, they're utilizing that and preying on people, you know, with COVID-19. And it's just unbelievable how quickly it happens, and they don't care who they're going after.
I've got a question that's come in, and I want to bring it to Tariq Malik. But before we go to him, Neil, it sort of ties into some of the work that you've been doing, but from a smart cities perspective and how we can ensure that we're all thriving in the digital economy, are there any examples that you want to reference from a global perspective, or any partners that you're working with at Forpay where you can say, hey, this is a good model for us to look at here in the Canadian context? And I want to go then to Eric as well, and then Mr. Malik, to see what those global contexts are. Neil, over to you.
So I'll share with you one client that we have down in the Caribbean. When we looked at establishing their environment, you know, we could either go the legacy route and follow a very traditional waterfall approach. One of the things that we considered is obviously CI/CD, everybody's continuous development, continuous integration. But we also flavored in continuous security. And so in that process, there's this constant evolution of their platform at every release that gives us the refresh. And so it's a different way of thinking, that it's not security just done and then you kind of monitor it and see what's happening. It is ensuring that security is at the beginning of the conversation and at the end of the conversation. It's woven throughout CI, CD, CS. And that was one very simple model that we implemented day one for our client down in the Caribbean to help them effectively manage new technology. And it seemed to have worked. it's a best practice that they've brought in as a standard for their organization. So I would definitely say that hopefully I answered the question.
And the question, a little bit more is, they've sort of made reference, and I believe this company has done some work with you as well. They're mentioning about, some of your work in the Bahamas, etc. So we'll come to that probably in the closing comments. But Eric and Mr. Malik, we'll start off with you, Eric. Is that from a City of Brampton perspective, your tagline is Brampton is now. You have a multicultural ethos in Brampton, a very strong trade community as well. What are some examples of initiatives or some partnerships that you form in order to propel forward this whole idea of a smart city, secure smart city, and taking businesses online? Eric?
So from that perspective, we always are looking for what other people are doing in terms of the smart city. And just before the coronavirus crisis hit, we have done the comprehensive studies on opportunities in what we call not necessarily the smart city, we call it a connected city in terms of the 5G technology, because this is what is happening. We know that 5G technology is coming, we like it or not, and the ISPs and technology providers are knocking to our doors. Or can we establish the partnership with you, and can we do something, put the infrastructure in place? And the challenge from the city perspective is how we can respond and establish those partnership with service providers, which is equal and fair to everybody, but at the same time be mindful on this is limited geographic area, and even with one technology provider, 5G technology, as great as it is, from the density perspective, it brings some challenges. How many devices, how many antennas do you want to put on a square meter or square kilometer of the geographic area? So we did the comprehensive study with our partners, and we identified some business cases and opportunities which we were about to present to council and try to explore those opportunities. Why the challenge now is that, as everybody can appreciate, that world before the coronavirus crisis look very different than the now, and very different. The new reality will be very different. So the challenge from that perspective is how much of those identified cases and identified opportunities still would be valid after the crisis. So that's basically what it is, because we're talking about crowdsourcing data, we're talking about multiple sensors to help people outdoors to do certain things or to enjoy certain things. How much that will be a priority in terms of our value anymore. So that's the biggest challenge. But from that perspective, we were looking for 5G as a technology. It is coming, how we can use this to create what we call connected city.
And a very good sort of note on the connected city piece. And there's a couple of comments that have come in. So I do apologize. There are about 30 odd people who have had a bit of a challenge coming into the broadcast. So I've let you in through the third-party avenue that we have. Please keep pushing your questions at me. I've got my gadget set up, so I will moderate for you. Don't worry. Mr. Malik, sort of building on the point by Eric, there's a question that's come forward in, do actually the government leaders have that kind of an understanding of how essential security is as they move towards these, or as they keep reaching out further and further for the smart city ideal? Is there the right buy-in, and let alone the buy-in, is there sufficient understanding? I want to give you 2 minutes to talk to that from your experience.
Security is something which you don't suddenly understand or suddenly get into. Security is something which is in your which you live and breathe. And unfortunately, the leadership is always living in a different world. That is more to do with finances and the facilities and services. So it's a difficult task. But I'll share our experience in Dubai's case. The advantage was that if they didn't understand this thing, whether this, to get the security implemented, one thing they did very well, that they said there is a department who was going to look after the security. And once they approve it, then we will offer this. So they made their life easy. The department took it very seriously, and which is always the case. No, but the powers were given to the department, that no one could override them and go and actually override them and move ahead. So once this department had the power, they stopped everything, and the questions were very simple. We sat down and looked at the scenarios. In my case, again, I've been dealing with the government. What I find is that quite often they think that the very simple amount of data, or the data which is public, it doesn't have any security value. But the guy or the team which is working on securing these environments, they actually need to understand the business process, the programming, the operating systems, the hardwares, the sensors, the networks. Then they look at the value of the data. And if they are coming from that sort of background, how can I use that data to actually use it to break in, or against my enemy, or whoever, whichever way you take it. So the value of the data, how you manipulate it, how you use it for whatever objective, whether to break in or whether to use that data for social engineering, whatever. So once you make them realize the value of very small piece of information, which they don't mind to be shared openly, then they start realizing. So the process is data, its value, how you manipulate it, how you take advantage of it, then you build the scenarios, and trust me, after that, they really, really, really understand it. As in another session, a lady was talking about it, that once I make them realize the value of the data, and I tell them, like she was talking about a fintech company, where financial company, where she had to go and tell them if the data of your most valued clients becomes public, what's going to happen? Who's going to do business with you?
Thank you so much for that point. Now we have about 5 minutes to the close, but I do want to wrap up with some strong closing statements and action items. Michael, we'll start off with you. You've always, when we've been talking before, I've also shared this with my students, that repair and not necessarily repair, but prepare and prevent is far better than repair and repent. And from your perspective, what is that one security aspect that, as we push towards digital environments, and we push towards taking even the most untouched person-to-person business as we take it to online environments, what's the one aspect from a security perspective you think we need to be paying attention to? One most important.
I think we need to be, comprehensive, and we need to be thorough, right? We need to not rush. Not go too slow, but not rush at the same time. And I like how you put that. To me, you're right. It is proactive over reactive as much as you can in the cyber world. But really, we need to take the time, whether it be through the vendor, through the government, through manufacturers, to ensure that we're doing it right, and I should say, be prepared to fix it or improve it as those gaps are found, and be prepared to do that quickly.
Very profound. John, I'll give you about 20 seconds-ish to talk about one aspect which has come up in a question. And that is this aspect of, security is not expensive. It's priceless. From your perspective, we've got a question asking, what's the one thing as a C-suite executive that's keeping you awake right now in this digitized environment?
Oh, there's so many things. I think it is the new ways that security is going to get breached. It's you can do your absolute best to make sure that you've got all the doors closed, but at some point somebody's going to figure out a way to open a window, and
Oh, yeah.
you need to be able to plan for how do we cover things off. You can't say, okay, well, if this happens, we'll do this, because you don't know what that is that's going to happen. But you need to have a way to be prepared and have a solution for a plan B type method that says, okay, if something happens, we'll shut everything down, we'll figure out what it is, and we'll get everything back up and running quickly. That's not ideal. Or you figure out ways to lock down pieces to prevent attacks until you can get it fixed.
Thank you for that. Neil, very quickly, because we do have to wrap up in a minute. I've got a couple of folks who have asked, hey, if we wanted to use ForPay for our services, what's the best way to reach out to you, Neil? So if you can just throw that out there, and I'll leave a lot, and I'll make sure that I get those contacts sent out by the email blast as well. Neil?
Yeah, visit our website at forpay.ca or go check out our new consumer portal at pay.ca. That's pay.ca. And just drop us a contact, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. But I just wanted to add as well, I think Michael and John and Tariq touched on it, but it's really growing on what Eric had stated initially, which is don't be afraid to pivot. You can have a great idea, but because security we're going to breakneck speeds, we need to make sure that we get the right product out there, we get the right solution out there to meet the need, and don't be afraid to pivot. Pivot as many times as you need to, because that's part of the evolution.
Fantastic. And Eric, for you and our friends from Invest Brampton, we've got Devin on, we have Astaba on, and we have Eric. Eric, what's if someone's looking for some resources with folks at Brampton, what's the best place to go to check those out?
So you're talking about the resources within the City of Brampton?
Yeah, ideally.
Yeah, so first of all, we have created something like the cross-functional team, which we call it Smart City team. Maybe we will be rebranding this because we don't really like the Smart City team buzzword. We like more like Connected City and everything, because Smart City is too much about the technology. And I don't believe that Smart City is really about the technology. Smart City is about how to make the city better to live and to live in using the technology. So the technology is in the back end. But from that perspective, yeah, we have then a good Smart City internal team, which is now focused on discovering and running some pilots. Some of those pilots we already put in a production.
Fantastic. So we'll make sure that we share your contacts as well. And, on behalf of Mr. Malik, the one thing that I learned from you today is, a cybersecurity breach does not happen by accident. So be aware of your blind spots. While you are moving into a hyper-digitized environment using financial technologies as well, you've got some great resources here in Ontario. Ontario is open for business, as you can see with Mr. Malik joining us as well. I do have to end this conversation here as another broadcasting group has to come in, but I thank you, gentlemen, for your time. I wish you all a happy, safe, and healthy weekend, and I hope to see you all at the closing ceremonies, where the rule is, if you do win the car, you give it to your pally alley. All right, so we'll talk to you later. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and I'm going to jump into another session. Take care all, and I'll make sure that I share all the contacts with you. Take care.
Bye now.
Thank